One of my absolute favorite things about covering politics on the internet are the people that I get to respond to. These characters, as I like to call them, always provide me with endless bits of entertainment based around their insane ignorance of the subjects that they purport to be experts in. And one of my absolute favorite people to cover on this channel, yes, it's the Young Turks, but we're not talking about them today, is also Kyle Kulinski. And the reason I like covering Kyle Kulinski is because covering him covers every single person that just regurgitates the points from Kyle Kulinski, because they assume because Kyle talks in this long, drawn-out, boring way that he is in some way an expert on what he discusses, because Kyle doesn't know a lot about politics, and I've talked about in the past, has incredibly authoritarian leanings despite the fact that people in his audience refuse to acknowledge it. In fact, I made a video on this channel before about how Kyle believed that an obscure law meant to protect people from environmental toxins like asbestos could be used in combination with COVID-19 to give everybody Medicare for all through executive order. And his big case study of this law actually doing that had to do with a chemical spill in one part of the country where something like less than 3,000 people total were given Medicare through this program. That's how ridiculous this guy is, and it's amazing to me that he's considered the policy wonk on the left. Now, that's really unhealthy. I find it to be an incredibly unhealthy obsession. We're rolling into our sponsor. It's a health thing. Weight loss gets more and more difficult as we get older. This is because once you hit your 20s, every subsequent decade will slow your metabolism by, on average, around 4%. And when you hit 50, it's about 10%. That's the reason why age and weight gain are strongly correlated, and it's also why I recommend Keto with Justice. Shortly after using this product, thousands of Americans have reported slimmer stomachs, weight loss, and leaner muscles, and it's the fastest way to burn fat that I know of. I highly recommend going to ketowithjustice.com so that you can get 51% off your product. Again, that's ketowithjustice.com, 51% off, and you get a 60-day money-back guarantee. So if it doesn't work out in 2 months, just send it back, get your money back. But why not try it? Come on. So I was scrolling on the internet.coms on the Twitters, and I was looking at the twitter.coms on the internet, and I saw this tweet from Kyle Kulinski that was suggesting that Joe Biden used the Justice Department to blackmail Joe Manchin into supporting a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill. And I laughed at this when I saw this. I thought this was maybe a drunk tweet from Kyle Kulinski. And what made me laugh even further is that Cenk's nephew, never to be outdone in the dumbness department, thought it was a really good idea. It turns out I am a man of very little faith, because Kyle Kulinski actually uploaded a video on his YouTube channel, Secular Talk, right here on the internet.com, advocating and explaining why he thinks it's a good idea for Joe Biden to blackmail Joe Manchin into supporting some stupid giant infrastructure bill. It's amazing. We got to get into this video, and we have to laugh at this guy who is not only projected as somebody who's intelligent, a policy wonk, but is also very much anti-corruption.
So Joe Manchin has apparently said behind the scenes, I will not support more than $1.5 trillion for this reconciliation bill. So the line from progressives correctly is, no, $3.5 trillion is the floor. That is the compromise. We're done here. I'm happy that they're arguing that. Now, that really is, though, just a negotiating position. And my actual red line, and I'm media, so I can share this with you guys. If I was a politician, I wouldn't necessarily share this publicly because I don't want to negotiate against myself. But my actual red line is $2 trillion. The reconciliation bill needs to be $2 trillion or more. And it obviously depends on the specifics of the bill. There should be some climate stuff in there. They have to keep a lot of the, stuff that I view as very important in there. But Manchin saying, no, I'm not, more than $1.5 trillion is a no-go. I'm done here. That's what's going on behind the scenes.
First of all, I find it incredibly amusing that Kyle Kulinski's line is arbitrarily $2 trillion. Joe Manchin says he won't go above $1.5 trillion. This is all funny money that we're making up anyway. Why would your line arbitrarily be $500 billion more than Joe Manchin's? Also, if you think this infrastructure bill is good or will do anything, and you're supposedly a policy wonk like Kyle Kulinski, maybe you should study any of the last infrastructure bills in the United States of America, i.e. the stimulus bills put forward by Barack Obama, because what we find out time and time again is there's no way any state or local municipality is going to double their infrastructure spending. It does not happen. Let me explain. Let's say you have a city or state or local municipality, and they have pledged, we'll just call it an outrageous number, $50 billion to infrastructure. And then the federal government comes in and they say, you know what? Here's another $50 billion, double up your infrastructure spending. No local or state government's going to do that. And because the federal money is specifically earmarked to be spent on infrastructure, what ends up happening and had happened throughout the Obama administration is they remove whatever amount of money it takes from their infrastructure budget, spend it on things that they want to, and then they supplement it with the federal government. So whether it's $2 trillion, whether it's $4 trillion, whether it's $1.5 trillion, it doesn't make a difference, because all this money allocated to all these states and local municipalities will have a net neutral effect at best. But in reality, infrastructure spending tends to go down when you have these big federal bills. Because when you take federal money, the Davis-Bacon Act kicks in, and that applies to whatever workers you're going to hire to do whatever infrastructure spending. So you end up spending extra money to survey the areas, because Davis-Bacon requires you to pay prevailing wage, to figure out what people make in this area so that you can find the prevailing wage and pay the employees that. Also, federal infrastructure projects come with federal requirements for environmental impact studies. So a lot of this money is going to go into the pockets of people who do environmental impact studies. All of these confluence of factors led even Barack Obama, after a couple of years of his stimulus bill, to point out that there is no such thing as a shovel-ready project. So Kyle's arbitrary $2 trillion is fine, but $1.5 trillion is not fine is totally meaningless, because it doesn't give you any insight or information into what's actually going to go down if something enormous and ridiculous like this is actually passed. And that's what's actually going to happen, because that's what happens every time the federal government tries to bolster up infrastructure spending. Nobody spends money in their local government on infrastructure like that, so the federal government is going to give them money and expect that to happen differently because reason.
So what do you do? What do you do if you get to an impasse and it looks like we're at an impasse? If they're saying, hey, $1.5 trillion maximum, they're probably starting with, no, let's do $800 billion. And the conservative Democrats want to get to $1.5 trillion max. And of course, the left is saying $3.5 trillion. Biden, to his credit, is saying $3.5 trillion.
So on the policy, as usual, in the purest, most simplest terms, Kyle Kulinski is just wrong and ridiculous, and this is all faux intellectualism, because the numbers don't matter, especially when you get that high, unless you're concerned about the currency, which Kyle Kulinski is not, so the numbers don't matter at all to him. It's all funny money, imaginary money. There's nothing in Kyle Kulinski's mind that he can't do with $1.5 trillion that he could do with $2 trillion. So weird line, just trying to oppose Joe Manchin for reasons, because he's Joe Manchin, and there's no points or policy analyses behind that. But let's move on, because it's about to get better.
So what do you do? Well, now we get to a news story that just came out maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and this blew up online. Credit to The Intercept, I believe they were the ones who originally reported this. Apparently Joe Manchin's daughter was illegally colluding with Pfizer to drastically increase the price of EpiPens. She works for a pharmaceutical company that produces EpiPens. And Joe Manchin's wife was using her position as head of the National Association of State Boards of Education to advocate that schools are required to stock up on EpiPens. So they have emails, they have her dead to rights, where she's saying, we need to find a rationalization as to why we're price gouging and jacking up the cost of these EpiPens, jacking up the price of these EpiPens. And again, they have hard emails. It's very clear she's violating the law. There's illegal collusion. There's price gouging. It's disgusting, grotesque pharmaceutical company corruption. And now we know that that's the case.
Now, this is actually an interesting scandal on its own, and it could theoretically warrant its own video if it were a little broader or if something more were to come of it. But essentially, Kyle Kulinski completely wrong in what he's actually talking about. Yes, it is true that Joe Manchin's daughter was trying to increase the price of EpiPens, but the way that they were trying to increase the price of EpiPens is not, we need to find a reason to do so. They had a reason to do so, and this was to sell all EpiPens in 2-packs, regardless of medical need. And the reason that this is actually pretty sinister is because EpiPens, the ingredient in EpiPens, which is epinephrine, expire after a certain period of time, and most people only need one in case of an emergency. And if the pen breaks, it might be good to have two, but for the most part, you're only going to need one in case of an emergency. And since they both expire at the same time, and most of these pens go unused because they're there for emergencies, this was a huge way to gouge prices in the EpiPen market. On top of that, there are also emails between Manchin's daughter and the CEO of Pfizer, where they convinced them to divest from a competitor to EpiPen called the Adrenoclick. Now, a lot of people don't realize this, but epinephrine and adrenaline are the same exact thing. And in reality, the whole thing with devices is down to bad government policy that allows substitutions for medications, but not for devices. For instance, if you get prescribed Tylenol and you go to the pharmacy and Tylenol is really expensive, you can actually have your pharmacist switch out to the generic alternative to Tylenol. And I know Tylenol is over the counter for one of you jackholes who's going to write that in the comments of the video. I'm just using an example so that you can understand it. However, it is not the same for medical devices, even if the medical device performs the same function. So since EpiPen is short, it's 6 letters long, doctors write out the prescription for that, and you can't get a substitute when you go to the pharmacy. So even if they had much cheaper Adrenoclicks there that you could use as a device to inject yourself in case of an emergency, or they just had adrenaline and needles, you couldn't get either if your prescription specifically said EpiPen. Also, because the FDA thinks you're stupid, they actually don't allow a bunch of other competing devices, because remember, the whole point is that this injects the thing into you in case of an emergency. It's not that complicated, because they think that you're too dumb to figure out how those devices work, and having that choice and opportunity would be crazy for you, and that you can only work the EpiPen. That's the only thing that you're able to do. So through these confluence of strategy and horrible, terrible government policy, Joe Manchin's daughter figured out that they could double up the purchase of each EpiPen by making you buy 2 at a time, and crowd out their competition with Pfizer by getting them to divest from them, and take advantage of the fact that you can't do substitutions at the pharmacy like you were able to do for drugs in order to jack up the prices of EpiPens. Or as Kyle Kulinski put it,
where she's saying, we need to find a rationalization as to why we're price gouging and jacking up the cost of these EpiPens.
Nothing of substantial information to inform you about what actually happened. Now, whether or not Joe Manchin's daughter actually violated a law, and when I say actually violated a law, I mean a real law, I'm sure she violated numerous regulations and restrictions on practices that could result in fines, is left to be determined later on. I don't think this is a jailable offense. According to how our corporate law works, I think this is more of a, you're going to pay a fine and say, I'm sorry for doing this, and then promise to never do it again, even though the government's not really going to come after you again kind of situation. That's not really important. What is important, though, is Joe Manchin's wife, as the head of the Department of Education in, I think, West Virginia, was actually trying to force schools to buy epinephrine. Now, this sounds really bad, and it, to me, is really bad, because she wasn't looking for cheaper alternatives, and big bulk buyers like schools should be able to deal with having an Adrenoclick or needles with adrenaline in it, but she wasn't looking to do that.
And it's not just Manchin's daughter, now it's Manchin's wife we know is in on this as well, trying to get the schools to have a stockpile of EpiPens to put more money in the pockets of the Manchin family. So some people calling him Joe Manchin, Mansion, Manchin, big house.
But even this is very dubious if you're trying to make a case against Joe Manchin and his family. Because while it is true and suspicious that while the daughter was trying to increase the prices of EpiPens through various tricky means that may or may not be legal, some of them that were definitely legal, taking advantage of bad federal government law and FDA restrictions on devices, it also kind of makes sense, unfortunately, for the mother, regardless of whether or not the daughter is the CEO of this company, to want to have an emergency supply of epinephrine in the schools. Can you imagine what would happen if your kid had a severe allergic reaction in a school, and that school could have bought something that you just pop into the leg and then it helps them out, but decided not to because it was cheap? It would be a total disaster. So even the big thing that looks straight up corrupt, because it's epinephrine, what we're talking about, and the device to deliver it, is not going to stick to Joe Manchin's wife. So in reality, they got nothing. But Kyle Kulinski, not knowing anything about policy, Kyle Kulinski being an absolute buffoon in how he thinks the government works, is going to propose taking this nothing, which, by the way, all looks bad, and also I think is a form of corruption, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be anything that's provable, and try to leverage that against Joe Manchin by having Joe Biden break the law in ways that will almost assuredly lead to his impeachment.
Okay, so what do you do now, given these two stories? If I'm Joe Biden, I pick up the phone and I call Joe Manchin and I say, hey, big guy, come to my office. I want to have a conversation with you. And when he comes in the office, I say, you know, my DOJ might just have to look into your daughter and might just have to look into your wife and might just have to look into your entire family and investigate them. And we might just have to bring charges. And they might just have to go to jail because we have the emails. We have them dead to rights. We know they violated the law. Now, is there anything that you, Joe Manchin, could do to make it so I back off and I don't put your family in jail? Well, maybe if you reconsider that $3.5 trillion bill, maybe we won't look into them. And maybe everything will be A-okay.
That is a real clip uploaded on Kyle Kulinski's channel. That is something that he not only thought was a good idea on Twitter when he was possibly drunk, but he thought it was such a good idea, he recorded a video of him saying it and putting it out on the internet. He thinks that Joe Biden should go over these Intercept article emails, which are emails between his daughter and all this, and threaten Joe Manchin over an infrastructure bill with criminal charges. Is this man insane? Is this man ridiculous? I get that people like to watch House of Cards or West Wing. This is more House of Cards. And I think that that's how politics works. But no, it isn't. This is how you get yourself impeached. Why would Joe Manchin accept blackmail from Joe Biden when it's so obvious and stupid? And by the way, I just explained how his wife would get off scot-free because of course you're going to have allergy medicine and devices to deliver it in case of an emergency for kids at schools, and how his daughter is likely going to pay a fine, and even she probably won't pay the fine. The company that she worked for, that she was acting in the interest of, would pay the fine for doing the thing with the EpiPens, trying to make it so people can buy two or have to buy two instead of one. So there's no case here, but Kyle Kulinski wants Joe Biden to torpedo his presidency for an infrastructure bill that does nothing. Like, it won't do anything, as I explained earlier in the video, except devalue the currency and cause inflation and all other problems, but it won't achieve the goals that he wants.
And maybe everything will be A-okay. You tell me, buddy.
I present to you the policy wonk of the left. The guy that other lefties look at his channel and repeat word for word on their channels because they think that's doing research. They think this is the guy to look to for advice on how to govern. This total buffoon who thinks that Joe Biden should bring in Joe Manchin and threaten him with the Department of Justice, making sure this is extra impeachable in order to get a pointless infrastructure bill passed. And then he smiles like a doofus as if he solved some kind of puzzle, as if he figured it out. Kyle, why don't you just have Joe Biden get the military to point guns at Joe Manchin's family to get him to vote the way you want? What's the difference in what you're saying for the results that you want? It's absolutely insane how authoritarian these lefties get at the drop of a hat over nothing. Again, it's infrastructure spending. Even if it worked, we'd have better paved roads and some new bridges. But Kyle's going to sweeten the pot for Joe Manchin.
Now, I'll sweeten the pot too. If you reconsider this $3.5 trillion bill, I'm going to look out for West Virginia. I'll put another military base there. We'll allocate more infrastructure. We'll double the amount of infrastructure spending going to West Virginia. You decide.
I'm not going to lie. I may have watched this video 4 or 5 times more than usual before prepping my response because I thought to myself, Kyle Kulinski can't be that dumb. He can't be that stupid and completely unaware of what he's suggesting and how insane it is. But he is, and now he's talking about sweetening the pot. We'll give you another military base, and we'll give you double the infrastructure. So everywhere we build one bridge, Joe, we're gonna build you 2 bridges if you just vote for this. If not, I'm gonna make sure your family's sleeping with the fishes. What the hell is this guy doing?
So you can either get a new military base in West Virginia and more infrastructure money, or your family can go to jail. You got to make him an offer he can't refuse.
And there he just says it. He's like, you're either going to get those extra bridges, we're going to either give you those extra tunnels in West Virginia, 2 tunnels every time you just need 1 tunnel, or your family's going to go to jail. Kyle, what the hell are you talking about? What is wrong with you? Who thinks that this guy is intelligent to take direction from about how American politics works? He's obviously watched way too many movies. This isn't how it works at all. It's a bunch of incompetents doing what's in their best interest. You're not doing House of Cards. Joe Biden is not going to be blackmailed publicly, by the way, in order to get this infrastructure bill passed. Joe Biden is not going to blackmail somebody publicly, by the way, in his own party in order to get a few extra $100 billion on his infrastructure bill. This is absolutely crazy. Also, this would lead to the ousting of Joe Manchin as a senator because you can't have a compromised senator, which would lead to the Republicans taking that seat because Joe Manchin is the only Democrat in the world who can hold that Senate seat. Absolutely ridiculous and insane, and yet Kyle continues, just in case you weren't clear enough, that he thinks Joe Biden should be a criminal.
This is what LBJ would have done, this is what FDR would have done, and it would have worked.
No, Kyle, this is not what LBJ would have done. This is not what FDR would have done. We actually know what Lyndon Baines Johnson did, and we can look back on it and compare it to what you're saying. Lyndon Baines Johnson, in order to get the Civil Rights Act passed, went to the UAW, the Auto Workers Union, and asked them not to strike during the time that they were voting on this bill because he knew their support was key in getting the Civil Rights Act passed. In exchange for that, he put a tax on imported trucks that still stands to this day in order to benefit the UAW. So what Lyndon Baines Johnson did was buy the support of a key constituency through a corrupt carve-out in order to get something he wanted passed. FDR did the exact same thing. He gave a lot of goodies and concessions to the Southern Dixiecrats who he needed in his coalition to pass any of the nationalistic policies that he wanted. And when I say nationalistic, I don't mean nationalist. I mean policies that the federal government would be implementing under the premise that he would distribute control over how these programs were allocated to these local Dixiecrats so that they could discriminate against black people. So that's how FDR did it. That's how Lyndon Baines Johnson did it. Neither one of these people tried to blackmail for legislation. Richard Nixon tried something like this where he was wiretapping the Democrats and he had to resign because he was going to face impeachment. That's what you're advocating for, Kyle, you buffoon.
And now they have the leverage on Manchin. Oh, they definitely have the leverage. Are they going to use it? Now, my guess is no.
Again, this is why it was really important for me to break down what the scandal with Joe Manchin's family actually meant, because they definitely don't have the leverage. And no, Biden is likely not going to break the law in the way that Kyle Kulinski wants, because he desperately wants people to pave roads a little bit harder. Ridiculous.
And my guess is they'll negotiate and they'll get down to some number, and then the left will have the decision, do we hold strong and vote no and tank everything because the number's not high enough, or do we give in and vote for it? A lot of that is going to depend on whether or not Bernie thinks the deal is legit enough.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders will vote for it because Bernie Sanders is weak and he votes for things to get along with the Democrats. Joe Manchin, the reason he has power in the Senate is because he's willing to use it. So depending on what Bernie Sanders, he'll vote for it. That's what he'll do. He'll be like, well, 1.5 trillion is better than 0 trillion. That's what Bernie Sanders will do.
But again, I'll tell you guys at the time what I think of the deal when the final deal comes out. But minimum don't come to me with no 1 trillion shit. Don't come to me with no $1.5 trillion shit. Don't come to me with no $1.9 trillion shit. 2 trillion or more, and the details of the bill better be good. They should keep in tuition-free community college. They should keep in universal pre-K. They should keep in a bunch of climate stuff. It's time to play hardball, dog. It's time to play hardball.
Again, what is this talk? Don't come at me with no 1.5. Don't come at me with no 1 trillion. It's got to be 2 trillion and the details got to be good. Well, I would hope from the policy wonk that, of course, details have to be good. You know, the actual legislation, not just here's $2 trillion, Joe Biden, go spend it on whatever you want. Also, universal pre-K and free community college. What this has to do with infrastructure, I don't know. In fact, I do know nothing at all, and definitely shouldn't be in the bill. And if they're trying to force it through reconciliation, it should be disallowed by the parliamentarian because it's completely off the topic of infrastructure. But yeah, we need that in there, and some climate stuff. So real important. We need some climate stuff in the bill for sure.
And if you don't, Joe Biden, then there will be no legacy to speak of. You'll be Bill Clinton 2.0 as opposed to FDR 2.0 or LBJ 2.0. So if the past is any indication of what the future will be, he'll buckle and be neoliberal, and either everything will fall apart or they'll pass a really watered down shitty bill.
Joe Biden would more than settle for being Bill Clinton 2.0. Bill Clinton was the first two-term Democrat since FDR. He was a hugely successful president, and he was able to triangulate between him and a Republican Congress and still come out with high approval ratings. Now, we know Bill Clinton's personal life has all its problems and all that, but to say that Bill Clinton didn't have a prestigious legacy is just not true. As for LBJ 2.0, nobody cares about LBJ to say he's 2.0, or FDR 2.0. Nobody's going to be FDR 2.0 because nobody's going to have the Great War, 4 terms, and a Great Depression all combined together. This is just nonsensical thinking. He's just trying to say pass new entitlements, and then people will love you because eventually they'll get addicted to that entitlement spending. But yeah, there's no analysis in here at all. Just Kyle Kulinski advocating for Joe Biden to break the law like the nut job that he is.
But we'll see. Play hardball with Joe Manchin. Use the story about his family breaking the law to put pressure on him, to exert leverage on him, and to get him to buckle to your will. Because really, you're just getting him to do the thing that the American people desperately want. And last time I checked, that's called democracy.
Abuse your power in the Justice Department to force him to do what you want under threat of throwing his family in jail. Because last time I checked, that's just called democracy, bro. Really, Kyle. Absolutely embarrassing in every way, but very teachable for those of you out there who think that Kyle's one of the more moderate lefties, that he's one of the more sensible, that he's one of the more intelligent ones. This is what he thinks politics is about. He thinks Joe Biden should go blackmail a senator in his own party to get $500 billion more on a pointless infrastructure bill. Absolutely ridiculous. Amazed that he put this out in video form. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, like it, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, support me via the support links. Till next time.